I drove 9 hours through a relentless downpour, my knees aching with arthritis. On the passenger seat, a homemade apple pie, carefully wrapped to surprise my daughter Sophie for her 50th birthday. But when I arrived, drenched to the core, I heard laughter spilling from the kitchen. God, I wish she'd just disappear. Sophie's voice cut through, sharp and unmistakable. Then we wouldn't have to deal with her endless calls? Her husband Nathan chuckled. Or at least get stuck somewhere. A weekend free of her guilt trips would be nice. Their laughter echoed. I set the pie on the counter and walked out. 10 days later, I revised my will. 3 weeks after that, they were still scrambling to figure out why their credit cards were frozen. At 77, I learned that revenge tastes sweetest when served with financial reckoning. My name is Clara Holt, widowed for 13 years, a breast cancer survivor, and a retired schoolteacher who still organizes her spice jars by color. After Walter passed, I stayed in our 2-story cottage in Willow Creek, where the memories felt like old friends. I live alone, his wool scarf still draped over the armchair, the rose garden he loved now thriving under my steady care. My relationship with my only child, Sophie, had been fraying for years, though I tried to ignore it. Our weekly phone calls grew clipped, her tone sharpening whenever I suggested a visit. Excuses sprouted like dandelions. Work deadlines, home repairs, social plans that never seemed to include me. Last Christmas, they jetted off to Jamaica instead of coming home. Work's been insane, Nathan claimed, while their social media flaunted beachside mojitos and catamaran sails. I blamed myself. Too clingy, too somber, too much the grieving widow who couldn't let go. Still, I sent care packages, homemade shortbread, hand-stitched mittens, birthday checks that grew larger as my longing for their affection deepened. I became the mother who waited by the phone, clipping articles they'd never read. What I never imagined, what no parent dares to, was how thoroughly they'd turned my love into a credit line. The credit cards I co-signed for their bathroom remodel, the loans for their first house that ballooned into a 5-bedroom Tudor with a hot tub, the down payment for a beach condo they secured while claiming they couldn't afford train tickets to visit for my birthday. The rain feels different now. Not a storm to endure, but a signal that even the fiercest deluges eventually pass. When the financial pillars I'd quietly propped up began to collapse, when their carefully curated world started to unravel without my support, I discovered something unexpected. Strength isn't about what you tolerate, it's about what you finally refuse to bear. That's how I stopped being a doormat and became the tempest. The apple pie took 2 days to craft. 3 layers of flaky crust, filled with tart apples I'd peeled and sliced, spiced with cloves and a whisper of ginger. I decorated it with lattice strips, each woven with care despite fingers stiffened by age. Sophie had adored apple pie since she was 8, when she announced at her birthday that chocolate cake was too predictable. I woke before dawn to start, setting out butter to soften while I cored apples until my wrists throbbed. The recipe was my grandmother's, refined over years with a touch more cinnamon. Walter used to sneak bites of the filling, thinking I didn't notice. I let him. "You're driving all that way by yourself?" Agnes asked when I shared my plan. She stood by the fence dividing our yards, pruning shears in hand, silver hair peeking from under her straw hat. We'd been neighbors for 35 years, since she settled in after her divorce. She'd watched Sophie grow, helped me nurse Walter in his final days, and brought me soups when chemo left me too weak to stand. "It's not a wagon trail, Agnes," I said, tucking the pie tin into the trunk, cushioned between quilts to keep it steady. "I'm taking the highway." "That's not the issue, Clara," she replied. "The forecast says storms all the way to Vermont." "And your knees?" "My knees and I have an agreement," I said, securing the pie. "They grumble, I push through." Agnes sighed, stepping back as she always did when she knew I wouldn't budge. At least keep your phone on and call me when you get there. Yes, ma'am, I teased, though we were nearly the same age. Someone's got to look after you, she muttered, returning to her peonies. I set out at 4 a.m. My overnight bag was packed with my favorite sweater and the rose-scented lotion Sophie used to adore as a child. A thermos of coffee sat beside me, its steam curling with the aroma of dark roast and a pinch of cardamom I'd added for warmth. The radio hummed softly, tuned to the classic station Walter and I once swayed to in our living room. The rain began just beyond Willow Creek, heavy drops smacking the windshield like whispered secrets. By the state line, it had turned into a steady, blinding curtain, reducing visibility to the faint red glow of the car ahead. My wipers fought to keep up, scraping across the glass in time with the dull ache in my knees. You should have listened to Agnes, I muttered to myself, tightening my grip on the wheel. My fingers were already stiff, the damp weather aggravating my arthritis. But I pressed on. 9 hours loomed ahead like a trial of endurance. What was a bit of rain and discomfort compared to the joy I imagined on Sophie's face when I arrived unannounced? I pictured it as I drove, her eyes brightening, hands clapping over her mouth, that rare giggle she let slip when truly surprised. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she'd say, followed by a hug, the kind I hadn't felt in years. The highway stretched out, a slick ribbon vanishing into the downpour. Trucks roared past, throwing up waves of water that briefly obscured my view. I eased down to 50, then 45, leaning forward as if those few inches could sharpen the blurry world beyond. The apple pie sat secure in its tin on the passenger seat, my tangible offering of love and hope. At a rest stop in New Hampshire, I gingerly stepped out of the car, my knees protesting with every movement. In the harsh fluorescent light of the restroom, I rubbed menthol cream into my joints, its sharp scent clashing with the stale air freshener. A janitor eyed me with concern as she handed me a paper towel. "Long trip ahead?" she asked. "Halfway there," I said, forcing a smile that felt more like a wince. "Storm's getting worse," she warned. "Might want to sit it out." But waiting wasn't an option. Birthdays don't pause, and I'd planned to arrive just before the supper Sophie mentioned hosting with friends. I hadn't told her I was coming, hadn't spoken to her in the 4 days since I'd decided to make the trip. The surprise was key. It would slice through the distance that had crept into our bond, sidestepping the rigid schedules and time limits that now defined our time together. Back on the road, I cranked up the heater to chase away the chill seeping into my bones. The dashboard clock glowed 9:32 a.m. 5 hours to go, if the weather didn't slow me further. I swallowed an ibuprofen without water, grimacing at its bitter sting. To distract from the pain, I let my thoughts drift to Sophie's earlier birthdays. At 5, her face lit up as she opened the wooden puppet theater I'd spent weeks building, complete with tiny velvet curtains and hand-painted backdrops. At 11, she blew out candles on a vanilla cake shaped like a piano, her music phase in full bloom. At 15, she acted nonchalant about the bracelet I'd saved months to buy, only to wear it daily for years. When had things shifted? When had my calls become burdens, my visits chores? When had I become an inconvenience, a shadow in her polished life? Maybe it was after Walter's death, when grief made me cling too tightly. Or when she married Nathan, whose family's lake house and yacht club status made my cozy cottage seem small rather than charming. Or perhaps when my illness loomed, the idea of caring for me a threat to her carefully crafted world. The rain grew fiercer as I crossed into Vermont, pounding the roof like restless fingers. A truck swerved ahead, jackknifing and forcing traffic to inch around flashing emergency lights glinting off the wet asphalt. My GPS recalculated, tacking on 40 minutes to my trip. By noon, my body was a chorus of aches, lower back tightening, neck rigid, knees burning despite the pills. But resolve is a painkiller of its own. I'd braved ice storms to get Sophie to piano recitals, waded through flooded roads for her high school graduation. A storm and sore joints wouldn't stop me now. The outskirts of Burlington emerged through the haze, familiar road signs offering a flicker of relief. I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror, lipstick smudged, hair plastered from leaning against the window. It didn't matter. I'd freshen up before stepping into Sophie's world. The rain eased for a moment, as if granting me a brief glimpse of clarity. The houses stood tall and distinct, their lawns impeccably trimmed despite the storm. Sophie's grand Tudor, the largest on the cul-de-sac, radiated a cozy glow against the dimming afternoon. Through the front window, I glimpsed shadows moving, figures weaving back and forth. Preparations for a birthday celebration, I assumed. One I hadn't been invited to join. I parked across the street, avoiding their driveway to preserve the surprise. Carefully, I lifted the pie tin, ensuring the lattice crust was still perfect, and stepped into the rain. The short walk to their front door, barely 20 feet, left my raincoat sodden, water seeping down my collar and into my sturdy loafers. I didn't bother with the doorbell. The door was unlocked, as it always was when they expected guests. Guests for a birthday, just not me. Stepping into the foyer, water dripped from my shoes, pooling on the polished slate floor. The air carried the warm scent of thyme and onions, evoking the elegant dinner parties Sophie and Nathan threw for their friends, events I hadn't been invited to in years. Their home was a showcase of meticulous taste, a vintage oak sideboard worth more than my old station wagon, modern sculptures Sophie claimed were investment pieces, despite their haphazard look, and a gallery of family photos that conspicuously excluded me. The slate gleamed under soft recessed lights, stark against my muddy footprints. I hesitated, doubt creeping in. Should I call out? Announce myself? The pie felt heavy in my hands, its weight more about my hopes than its buttery crust. Laughter drifted from the kitchen, punctuating the easy chatter between my daughter and her husband. I inched forward, rehearsing my greeting. Surprise! Felt too forced. Happy birthday, dear. Too sentimental. Maybe a simple hello would do. Just before I turned the corner, I heard my name. Mom called again this morning, Sophie said, her tone laced with the sharpness I'd come to recognize. Fourth time this week. What did she want now? Nathan replied, his voice tinged with boredom. I froze, the pie tin growing heavier in my arms. The usual, Sophie said, to ramble for an hour about nothing, to remind me she's all alone, to make me feel bad for having my own life. My breath hitched. I should have turned back, walked out with my pride intact, but my feet were cemented to the floor, my body refusing to flee. At least she didn't show up for your birthday, Nathan said. Remember last year? She stayed a whole week. Ugh, don't remind me, Sophie groaned. I had to escape to the study just to breathe. Each word struck like a stone. I stood motionless, rain dripping from my coat onto their pristine hardwood. She hinted at visiting soon, Sophie went on. I told her we're swamped with work. Smart move, Nathan said. The last thing we need is her dropping by unannounced. The irony might have been wryly funny if it hadn't shattered me. I pictured them. Sophie at the counter, slicing vegetables, Nathan tending a pot on the stove. Their domestic scene felt staged, more performance than genuine warmth. Then Sophie's voice cut through again. God, I wish she'd just crash somewhere, she said abruptly, and my heart stopped. Then we wouldn't have to deal with her constant nagging. Nathan laughed. Or get lost for good. A weekend without her guilt trips would be a gift. Their laughter blended, sharp as venom, sweet as deceit. The pie tin trembled in my hands. My daughter, the girl I'd soothed through fevers, driven to late-night clinics, helped with last-minute book reports, and comforted through heartbreaks with hot cocoa and patience, had just wished me gone. And her husband, who'd vowed to cherish our family, laughed along. I don't recall choosing to move. My body carried me into the kitchen, where they stood exactly as I'd imagined. Sophie chopping carrots, Nathan stirring a simmering pot. Their faces, when they saw me, paled with shock, mouths forming silent ovals of dread. Time seemed to pause. I saw the panic flicker in their eyes, their minds racing to gauge what I'd overheard, how to salvage the moment. Sophie's hand drifted to her throat, a nervous tick she'd picked up from me, a reflex when words failed. I said nothing, shed no tears. I simply set the pie tin on the counter, turned, and walked back to the door I'd entered through. "Mom!" Sophie called after me. "Mom, wait!" Sophie's voice chased me, but I was already back in the rain, moving faster than my aching knees should have allowed, back to my car, back to the road that had led me to this heartbreak. "Clara, please!" Nathan's voice joined hers, a faint plea cut off as I slammed the car door, shutting out their excuses. I turned the key in the ignition, my hand steady despite the storm inside me. It's strange how clarity can bloom in the moment everything shatters. The windshield wipers flicked back and forth, relentless in their rhythm. Swipe, pause, truth, love, betrayal. In the rearview mirror, I saw them in the driveway, Sophie clutching her arms, Nathan's hand on her shoulder. They shrank as I drove away, small and fleeting in the gray rain. I didn't look back again. The storm seemed to thicken as I reached the highway, as if the sky itself were shielding my escape. My clothes clung to me, damp and cold, but the discomfort felt distant, overshadowed by the emptiness swelling in my chest. The passenger seat, now bare without the apple pie, sat lonely in the dim afternoon light. My phone buzzed in my bag. Once, twice, then a relentless stream of calls and texts. I didn't need to look to know it was Sophie, desperately trying to mend what was beyond repair. I silenced it without a glance. Where do you go when the home you believed in turns out to be a mirage? When the love you've clung to is revealed as conditional, the bond you've nurtured reduced to duty? The highway unfurled before me, a path of endless unknowns, none leading back to the illusions I'd held an hour ago. I drove without direction until the gaslight blinked on, its soft glow a reminder that even in emotional freefall, practical needs persist. A motel flickered into view through the rain, one of those roadside relics with faded signs and dubious hygiene. Its blinking vacancy light felt like a quiet invitation, not just to rest, but to vanish for a while. The room smelled of bleach and stale smoke, the striped bedspread a weak attempt at warmth. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my sodden clothes, staring at the peeling wallpaper until my vision blurred. For the first time since hearing those crushing words, I let the weight of it all settle. This wasn't just a cruel remark born of a bad moment. It was the endpoint of years of quiet rejections, flimsy excuses, a relationship I'd kept alive with hope while it withered. Sophie hadn't just dismissed my visit, she'd erased my place in her world. My phone vibrated 19 times that night. I didn't answer. Dawn crept through the thin motel curtains. I'd slept in my damp clothes, too numb to care about comfort. My phone had gone quiet around 1:30 a.m., its battery drained by endless notifications. In the stark bathroom light, my reflection was unfamiliar, eyes sunken, lines etched deeper around my mouth. I showered, put on yesterday's clothes, and checked my phone. 25 missed calls, 38 texts. Sophie. Mom, please call us. Sophie. You got it wrong. Nathan. Clara, let us explain. Sophie. I'm worried. Where are you? Sophie. This isn't fair. You're scaring us. Nathan. Just tell us you're okay. Sophie. If you don't answer, we'll call the police. That last one was a hollow threat. Sophie wouldn't dare explain why her aging mother had fled in distress. I set the phone face down and weighed my choices. I could return home and act like nothing happened. I could confront them, demand apologies, or I could choose something else entirely. This wasn't the first wound. There had been smaller betrayals I'd brushed off. The Christmas they canceled, claiming Nathan had a cold, only to post photos from a Maine ski lodge on social media. The weekend visit when my shampoo was moved from the guest bathroom to a cupboard before their friends arrived. The thank you note for a graduation gift I sent Nathan's nephew, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Powell, as if I were a stranger. Moments I'd excused as oversights now wove a pattern too clear to ignore. Instead of heading home or back to Sophie's, I punched a new address into my GPS. A small inn in Concord, close enough to gather my things from Willow Creek later, far enough from Sophie to carve out space to think, free from the pull of routine. My phone rang again. Not Sophie or Nathan, but Agnes. "Clara, thank heavens," she said, her voice tight with relief. "I've been calling since yesterday. Are you okay? Sophie called me, said something went wrong." "I heard them, Agnes," I said. "I heard Sophie wish I'd crash my car and die." Silence hung for 3 breaths. "Where are you?" she asked, her tone sharp with quiet fury. "Heading to Concord." "Good. Don't go back there. Come home when you're ready." "I've got that bottle of Macallan Walter gave me before he passed," Agnes said. "I think it's time we cracked it open." For the first time since stepping into Sophie's kitchen, a faint smile tugged at my lips. Not joy, not yet, but an acknowledgement of a truth I'd missed. I may have lost a daughter, but I wasn't alone. "I'll be home in a few days," I said. "Keep the scotch chilled." "That's not how you drink scotch, you savage," Agnes shot back. And the familiar ease of our banter felt like the first steady footing I'd found in 24 hours. I hung up and kept driving, the highway stretching out like a riddle I wasn't ready to solve. The rain had cleared, leaving the world glistening, renewed in a way my heart couldn't yet mirror. But somewhere between the pain and the open road, a quiet resolve began to stir, whispering of what might come next. Not forgiveness, not now, perhaps not ever, but something new. 3 days at the inn in Concord gave me something I hadn't felt in years: solitude without isolation, no calls to field, no facade to uphold. I bought new clothes at a nearby outlet, practical pieces, nothing like the bright blouses Sophie always said would liven me up. I muted my phone except for Agnes's calls, who kept me updated on my house and my cat, Whiskers. "You know they showed up, right?" Agnes said during our nightly check-in. "Sophie and Nathan, banging on your door, then mine when they saw you weren't home." "What did you say?" I asked. "That you're safe and will reach out when you're ready." Nathan tried that smooth-talking nonsense he does. I'm old, not gullible. On the 4th morning, I called my bank. "I need details on any accounts where I'm listed as a guarantor," I said after confirming my identity. The representative paused. "You mean joint accounts, Mrs. Holt?" "No," I clarified. "Accounts where my assets are backing someone else. Credit cards, loans, anything." What followed hit harder than Sophie's cruel words. 4 credit cards with combined limits of $80,000, all tied to my name. A personal loan of $25,000, taken out 3 years ago. A secondary guarantee on their home equity line. "When were these set up?" I asked, my voice calm despite my trembling hands. "The oldest card dates back 7 years," the representative said. "The newest was opened 5 months ago." 5 months ago, when Sophie had called, voice breaking, about Nathan's failing startup. When I'd offered to send money and she'd brushed it off, saying, "We don't need handouts, Mom, just your support." Support, I now realized, meant my signature, not my sympathy. Next, I called Walter's old financial advisor. Clara, what a treat to hear from you. Must be 6 years, he said warmly. I need a full breakdown of my assets, I replied. Everything Walter left. Everything I've built since. By that afternoon, he'd emailed a report. The cottage in Willow Creek, now worth 4 times our original purchase. Walter's life insurance prudently invested. My teacher's pension, stock portfolios that had grown through careful stewardship. Family keepsakes, my grandmother's emerald pendant, Walter's father's vintage fountain pen collection. All told, just over $2.1 million, nearly enough for the beachfront condo in Maine that Sophie and Nathan had been eyeing, while claiming they couldn't afford bus fare to visit me for Thanksgiving. The condo. The final piece fell into place when I called Nathan's mother, Diane Powell, with whom I'd kept a polite but distant rapport. Clara, how nice to hear from you. Are you calling about the condo? She asked. Sophie's thrilled about it. The condo? I kept my tone even. The one they're closing on next month, Diane said. Our loan helped, but Nathan mentioned you're pitching in too. I wasn't, not knowingly, but the picture was clear. My financial stability was their scaffold. That night, I sat on the inn's creaky bed surrounded by bank statements and scribbled notes, piecing together a timeline of manipulation so calculated it couldn't be accidental. Every emotional withdrawal, every canceled visit, every cold call, aligned with a financial one. Each brush-off of my role in their lives came with an expansion of my role in their credit. I thought of Walter, how meticulously he'd secured our future, how proud he'd been to leave me cared for. Look after Sophie, he'd said in his final days, but don't let her take your heart for granted. He'd seen what I couldn't, but don't let her exploit your kindness, Walter had warned. He'd seen what I'd been too blind to accept. In the inn's dim mirror, I didn't just see a naive old woman who'd missed years of betrayal, but the outline of someone resilient. Someone who'd raised a daughter through Walter's long military absences, earned a master's degree at 41 while teaching full-time, and faced breast cancer with more grit than she now mustered for family dysfunction. That night, I made one last call to Evelyn Carter, my bridge partner of 17 years and the sharpest estate attorney in 4 counties. I need to see you, I said when she picked up. It's about my will. Is this about Sophie? Evelyn asked, her voice cutting straight to the point. Yes, and about me. It's time. My office, Wednesday, 9:30 a.m., she replied. Hanging up, I felt something new, not the sting of betrayal or the void of grief, but a calm, steady certainty. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice, starting with the woman staring back at me. Evelyn's office overlooked rolling hills, its sleek furniture designed to discourage lingering. Like Evelyn herself, the space demanded strength. At 70, she still dyed her hair a vivid auburn and wore heels that added 3 inches to her commanding frame. You look changed, she said, skipping pleasantries. I am changed, I replied. She nodded, motioning to a seat. Tell me everything. I recounted it all. The 9-hour drive, the overheard cruelty, the financial web I'd uncovered. Evelyn scribbled notes, her face impassive even through the rawest details. And now, she asked when I finished. I want to rewrite my will. Completely. And I need guidance on cutting my financial ties without legal risk. Her smile was fleeting, but warm. I've been waiting for you to stand up like this. Let's start with the will. For 2 hours, we reshaped my estate plan. The cottage on Cedar Lane, my investment portfolio, and all financial assets would go to the Willow Creek Women's Center, where I'd volunteered after Walter's death. Personal belongings would be shared among friends, with specific gifts for Agnes and other neighbors who'd shown true care. And for Sophie? Evelyn asked, pen poised. I paused, then said, my cookbook and my journals. so she can read about the mother she overlooked and the life she didn't cherish. Evelyn jotted it down. Subtly sharp. I like it. Next, we tackled the financial unraveling. Evelyn brought in her colleague, a banking law expert, and we drafted letters to remove my guarantees from Sophie and Nathan's credit accounts, effective immediately. We informed their mortgage lender I was withdrawing my secondary guarantee on their home loan. We closed old joint accounts I'd forgotten about and opened new ones in my name alone. They'll feel this soon, Evelyn's colleague cautioned. Credit limits may drop to nothing. Loan terms could shift. I understand, I said, signing another document with unwavering hands. The beach condo deal will likely collapse without your backing, Evelyn added. I recalled Sophie's voice. I wish she'd just crash somewhere. Their laughter, their casual dismissal of me as a tool, not a person. Let it, I said. Before leaving Evelyn's office, I made one more call to Diane Powell, Nathan's mother, with whom I'd maintained a courteous but arm's-length connection. I'm letting you know I've removed my financial guarantees from Sophie and Nathan's accounts, I said without preamble. I don't follow, Diane replied, her voice tinged with confusion. The guarantees they've used for credit and loans, including, I believe, the beach condo. A pause. Clara, they told us you were covering half the down payment. That's why we loaned them the rest. A wry laugh escaped me. I'm not, and I won't be. I thought you should know before the closing. That evening, back in my inn-room, I felt neither victory nor remorse, but a quiet, clear resolve. I ordered room service, a rare indulgence, and savored my meal as the sun dipped below the Concord skyline. My phone had buzzed all afternoon, calls from unfamiliar numbers I suspected were Nathan trying new lines to reach me. Finally, I answered one. What have you done? Nathan's voice was taut with panic, not concern. Hello, Nathan, I said calmly. I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. His voice was sharp with panic. The bank called about our credit cards. They're restructuring them because you pulled your guarantee. The mortgage company, too. And Mom mentioned you called about the condo. Yes, I spoke with Diane, I replied. Curious that you told her I was covering half the down payment when we never discussed it. It was a mix-up, he said quickly. We need to sort this out. Whatever you think you heard that day, I know exactly what I heard. I cut in. And what I've learned since shows it wasn't a one-off, but a pattern. Clara, please, he pleaded. No more, Nathan. No more schemes. No more guarantees. No more funding a life that only includes me when my credit is useful. Tell Sophie the woman she wished would crash has finally opened her eyes. I hung up and blocked his number. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight home for the next day. 9 hours of driving had brought me to a reckoning. A 90-minute flight would carry me toward renewal. As I packed my new clothes into my worn suitcase, I felt neither youthful nor aged, neither triumphant nor broken, but something else entirely. Free. Free from illusions about Sophie's love, free from financial ties that bound me to people who'd dismissed me, free to shape the final chapters of my life without owing those who'd forsaken my heart. The rain that had shadowed my drive to Sophie's had cleared, replaced by a crisp sky, as if the world itself endorsed my clarity. At 77, I'd learned some storms aren't meant to be weathered. They're meant to sweep away what no longer belongs. Home felt transformed when I returned. The familiar rooms of my Willow Creek cottage held the same furniture, the same framed photos, the same view of the oak tree Walter planted when Sophie was born. But I moved through them as a new woman, one who'd finally seen her own value. Whiskers greeted me with his usual aloofness, then curled up on my lap all evening, as if to anchor me. Agnes brought the promised Macallan and joined me on the back porch as dusk settled over the rose garden. They've been calling me every day, she said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. Sophie sounds more angry than worried now. The financial notices must be hitting, I replied. Agnes raised an eyebrow. What exactly did you do? I told her everything. The rewritten will, the cancelled guarantees, the condo truth. When I finished, she lifted her glass in a quiet toast. Walter would be proud, she said simply. 3 days later, the first letter arrived. Crisp ivory stationery, Sophie's neat handwriting on the envelope, formal in a way our bond never was. Dear Mom, I don't understand what's happening. You won't take our calls. The bank says our credit limits are slashed because you're no longer our guarantor. Nathan's mom mentioned you asked about the loan we got from them last year. Whatever you think you heard that day, you got it wrong. We were just venting. Dark humor after a rough week. You know how Nathan and I talk. Please call us. We're worried about you. Love, Sophie. No apology, no accountability, just deflection dressed as concern, financial fear cloaked in care. I folded the letter and tucked it into the box with Sophie's childhood sketches, a final piece in the story of our relationship. That evening, Nathan called from a new number. The condo closing is next Thursday, he said, skipping any greeting. The sellers won't budge on the deadline. We need your guarantee back by Tuesday. Hello, Nathan, I said coolly. That won't be happening. Clara, be reasonable. This is our dream home. We've been working for years toward this. Interesting, I replied. Those same years you said you couldn't afford train tickets to visit for Thanksgiving. Silence. That was different, he stammered. Holiday travel's pricey. And $1 million condo isn't? I said. Goodbye, Nathan. I hung up, feeling neither glee nor regret, only a quiet certainty that I was finally on solid ground. The next week brought growing desperation. Daily letters from Sophie, each less about mending our bond and more about financial strain. Voicemails from Nathan, swinging between charm and veiled blame. Even calls from their friends, people I'd met briefly at events where I was Sophie's mom, not Clara, suddenly concerned for my well-being. The mortgage company sent a formal letter to my home, requesting confirmation of my withdrawal as secondary guarantor. The mail brought a steady stream of letters from credit card companies, each one detailing the collapse of Sophie and Nathan's financial web, built on my name without my full consent. On Tuesday, a text from an unknown number. Mom, please. We're losing the condo. All that money? Gone. Is that what you want? I didn't reply, but the message crystallized a truth. Even now, Sophie's focus was on the condo, not our broken bond. Not once in her messages did she address the cruel words I'd overheard, only brushing them off as a misunderstanding. Friday morning, I met Rachel, Sophie's college friend, at a diner in Willow Creek. I'd reached out to her, not the other way around. Thanks for coming, I said as we sat with our coffees. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Sophie's frantic about you, Clara. She says you misheard something and now you're punishing her. I smiled thinly. Did she tell you what I misheard? She said you overheard a private talk and took it out of context. I heard my daughter wish I'd crash my car and die, I said evenly. Tell me, Rachel, how should I have taken that? Her eyes widened, her coffee cup frozen midair. She didn't say that. She wouldn't. She did. And Nathan laughed. I sipped my tea. Did she mention they've been using me as a guarantor for years? That they borrowed from Nathan's parents for a condo down payment while telling me they couldn't afford a Thanksgiving visit? Rachel's silence spoke volumes. I'm not here to vent, I continued, sliding an envelope across the table. This is an invitation to my 78th birthday party next month. I'd love for you to come. Sophie and Nathan aren't invited. As Rachel left, visibly rattled, I felt neither triumph nor guilt. Just the steady certainty that truth, once spoken, carves its own justice. That afternoon, a text from Diane Powell. The condo closing fell through. You should know they're blaming you to anyone who'll listen. I replied, thank you for telling me. I'm sorry they dragged you into this. Her response was swift. Don't be. George and I are seeing them clearly now. We should have listened to you sooner. That felt like the first true win. Not the financial fallout I'd triggered, but this quiet validation that I hadn't been mistaken all along. 4 weeks after leaving the apple pie on Sophie's counter, she called again. This time, I answered. Mom, she said, her voice cracking with what sounded like relief. Finally, we've been so worried. Have you? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Of course we have. You vanished. You changed all our financial arrangements without a word. You've been talking to our friends behind our backs. I heard what you said, Sophie, I interrupted. Wishing I'd crash. Wanting a weekend free of my guilt trips. Silence stretched across the line. That was just... Don't, I cut in. Don't lie to me now. Her voice broke into sobs, not the calculated tears I'd seen too often, but what seemed like genuine regret. We didn't mean it. We were stressed. You call so much, always sounding so lonely, and we feel so guilty. That's the issue, I said. You see my love as a burden, my calls as a chore, my presence as something to tolerate. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither was wishing me dead, I replied. But here we are. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice raw. Nothing, I said. That's the point. I don't want your time, your attention, or your forced affection anymore. I've rewritten my will, cut my financial support, and started a life that doesn't hinge on scraps from my only child. You can't just abandon us, she said, panic rising. The condo deal collapsed. Our credit cards are maxed. Nathan's parents are asking about loans we can't repay right now. There it was. Not concern for me, but for what I could provide. Is that why you called, Sophie? I asked. To turn the financial tap back on? No, she said too quickly. That's not it. I want to fix our relationship, Mom. I love you, Sophie said, her voice wavering. Do you? I replied. Love requires respect, and respect demands honesty. You haven't been honest about your feelings, your finances, or my role in your life for years. That's not true, she said, but her words lacked strength. When was the last time you visited without asking for something? I asked. When did you call just to talk? Not to manage my expectations or set boundaries. When did you treat me like a person you value, not a duty you juggle? Her silence was answer enough. I won't be your bank anymore, Sophie, I said. And I won't be your emotional punching bag either. If you want a relationship, it'll be on new terms. Mutual respect, genuine care, and total honesty. Her tone hardened, the victim's mask slipping. And if I can't meet those terms, you'll choose being right over being my mother? After all your talk about family first? Family is first, I agreed. But what you and Nathan have shown isn't family. It's exploitation dressed as duty. This is about the money, isn't it? She snapped. You're punishing us financially because your feelings were hurt. No, Sophie, I said. This is about consequences. For the first time in your adult life, your actions toward me have real weight. The financial part is just the clearest piece. Nathan says you've always been manipulative, she threw out, a desperate jab. Using guilt to control me. I laughed, genuinely amused. Says the man who convinced me to back loans for a condo you said you couldn't afford. The irony would be rich if it weren't so painful. So that's it? She said. 30 years as my mother, erased over one comment you overheard? Not erased, I corrected. Redefined. I'm still your mother. I love the girl you were and the woman you could become. But I'm done with the role you've cast me in: financial safety net and emotional scapegoat. If you want a relationship, it starts with owning what I heard that day. And if I apologize, say I'm sorry for what you heard, will you reinstate the guarantees? Help with the condo? Even now, her apology was a bargain, not a bridge. Goodbye, Sophie, I said softly. When you're ready to talk about us without mentioning money, you know where I am. I hung up before she could reply, feeling neither victory nor loss, but a profound peace. For the first time in years, I'd spoken my truth without fear of abandonment, because I'd already lost what mattered most. Outside, spring had arrived unnoticed. The oak tree Walter planted when Sophie was born was sprouting, tender green buds reaching for the sun. Soon, it would shade the garden I'd neglected last summer, too consumed with chasing a relationship that lived only in my hopes. This year, I'd plant zucchini and maybe try blackberries, as Agnes had suggested. Crops that take time to root, but yield for years. At 77, I still had time to cultivate something enduring, something real. 6 weeks after the storm-soaked drive, I hosted my 78th birthday in the garden of my Willow Creek cottage. Not the lavish affair Sophie always pushed for. Rent the yacht club, Mom, make it grand. But a gathering true to me. Agnes brought her legendary coleslaw. Evelyn arrived, her auburn hair catching the light from blocks away. My bridge group, my knitting circle, the women I'd volunteered with at the community center, people I'd sidelined while prioritizing those who valued me least, were all there. Rachel came too, choosing our honest diner conversation over her long friendship with Sophie. She tried to make me pick sides, Rachel admitted as we set out sandwiches on my grandmother's porcelain trays. Said I was betraying her by coming. And yet you're here, I noted. I am, she said. Loyalty has limits when someone demands you ignore cruelty. We ate apple pie, a new recipe with nutmeg and a hint of lemon zest, served on the delicate china I'd saved for occasions that never felt worthy, until now. As the evening light bathed the lawn in gold, Evelyn raised her glass. To Clara, who at 78 has more strength than most half her age. To new roots, Agnes added, and knowing your own value. I looked at the faces around me, some friends of decades, others newer additions, and felt a warmth bloom in my chest. This was family, chosen and true, built on mutual respect rather than duty. Texts from Sophie still arrived, less often now, but no less calculated. Mom, the mortgage lender's pressing us. Nathan's truck needs repairs we can't cover. Why are you punishing us over one comment? I didn't reply. Some lessons come only through consequences, and Sophie's education in accountability was still unfolding. Instead, I turned to rebuilding the life I'd paused while chasing her approval. I rejoined the community center board I'd left when Sophie claimed it took time away from family. I enrolled in pottery classes, a dream I'd shelved since Walter's death. Most meaningfully, I began volunteering 3 afternoons a week at the Willow Creek Women's Center. Many residents were around Sophie's age, women piecing themselves back together after relationships that diminished them. I helped with cover letters, rehearsed job interviews, or simply listened as they unpacked lives they never expected. You're not like other older volunteers, one woman said as we polished her resume. You understand how someone can love you and wound you at the same time. I've had some experience, I replied. In their stories of manipulation and denial, I saw echoes of my own, not the same in scope, but similar in essence. When the center's director learned I'd redirected my estate to the organization, she insisted on treating me to lunch. That's an extraordinary gift, Clara, she said. What inspired it? I shared the story of Sophie, the overheard words, the discovery of how thoroughly I'd been used. Is this about punishing your daughter? She asked, not accusing, just probing. No, I said after a moment. It's about honoring what lasts. These women are rebuilding with courage. My resources should nurture strength, not enable entitlement. By fall, my days had a rhythm that felt both fresh and familiar, like rediscovering a self I'd set aside years ago. I planted the blackberry bushes Agnes had urged me to try and joined a walking club for seniors, exploring local paths each week. Sophie sent a birthday card, store-bought, with a generic note and a gift card to a coffee chain. No personal message, no nod to our last conversation. I sent a polite thank you text, upholding the boundary I'd set. Courtesy without surrender. Through Diane Powell, now a monthly coffee companion, I learned Sophie and Nathan had moved to a smaller home, unable to sustain the tutor without my backing. Nathan had taken a second job. Sophie started working as a property manager, a role she'd once scoffed at as beneath her degree. I took no joy in their struggles but saw their necessity. For too long, I'd shielded them from the outcomes of their choices. Now, reality was teaching what my love had delayed, a chance to grow through hardship. In November, as the first snow dusted the oak tree Walter planted, Rachel called with news. "Sophie's pregnant," she said. "About 3 months along. I thought you'd want to know." I sat with this for days, emotions knotted like thread I couldn't untangle. A grandchild. A hope I'd let go as Sophie neared 50. A new life entering the world amid the ruins of our relationship. After careful thought, I sent a card. Not a text or email, but fine stationery with my careful handwriting. "I've heard your news. A child changes everything, sometimes by their presence, sometimes by what they reveal. I wish you the wisdom to cherish what truly matters. If you're ready to build a relationship rooted in mutual respect, not financial ties, my door is open. With love, Clara." She didn't reply, but I hadn't expected her to. Some roots take time to grow, if they take hold at all. 6 months after that stormy drive to Vermont, I sat in my kitchen, jotting down a shopping list for Thanksgiving dinner. I'd invited Agnes, Evelyn, and new friends from the Women's Center and Walking Club, my chosen family, forged in this season of renewal. My phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but curiosity prevailed. "Hello, Mrs. Holt?" said a voice. "This is Dr. Marrow from Burlington General. Your daughter Sophie is here and asked me to call." My heart skipped. "Is she okay?" "She's stable," he said. "She had some bleeding and was worried about her pregnancy. Tests look fine, but we're keeping her overnight for observation. Her husband's away for work, and she asked me to reach out." "Thank you," I said, already mapping the drive to Burlington. "She also asked," the doctor added gently, "if you'd come. She said to tell you she's sorry, but only if you meant what you wrote in your card." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Tell her I'll be there in 3 hours." The drive to Burlington was unlike that rain-soaked trip 6 months earlier. No storm, no apple pie, no hopeful anticipation or crushing betrayal. Just clear November light and the steady hum of my car, carrying me toward a conversation decades in the making. Sophie looked fragile in the hospital bed, her hand resting gently over the slight curve of her belly. When she saw me, her eyes welled up. Not the calculated tears I'd grown wary of, but something rawer, more real. "You came?" she said softly. "You asked," I replied, pulling a chair beside her. We sat in quiet for a moment, the hum of monitors and faint hospital sounds filling the space. "I've been seeing a therapist," Sophie said at last, staring at her hands. "Since the condo fell through. At first it was just to cope with the stress." She glanced up. "But it's become more." I waited, giving her room to continue. "She asked why I resented your calls, why I felt obligation instead of connection, why I could say such awful things about someone who only showed me love." She met my eyes. I didn't have good answers. "And now?" I asked gently. Now I see I've been punishing you for years, for being alone after Dad died, for needing me when I wanted freedom, for reminding me of a simpler life when I was chasing something grand. Her voice cracked. For loving me without conditions when I couldn't love myself that way. It wasn't a full reckoning. Those take years, not months, but it was a start. A seedling pushing through cracked earth. The financial mess, she went on, losing the condo, moving to a smaller place, Nathan's second job. It's been brutal. But my therapist says, she gave a small, tearful laugh. It's the best thing that could have happened. We were building a life on appearances, not real connection. And what do you think? I asked. I think she's right. And I think you knew it all along. She reached for my hand, hesitant. I'm not asking for money, Mom, or guarantees, or anything like that. I just want to try building something real with you before this baby arrives. I took her hand, feeling its warmth against mine. I'd like that too. We didn't resolve everything in that hospital room. Healing is a journey, not a moment, full of stumbles and small triumphs. In the months that followed, we built new habits. Weekly teas where money was off limits, occasional dinners where we dug deeper than small talk. Nathan struggled more with the shift. His charm lost value when it couldn't buy material gain, but he was trying, if only for Sophie and the child they awaited. I held fast to the life I'd crafted during our estrangement. The Willow Creek Women's Center stayed in my will, though I added a trust for my grandchild's education. My friendships grew stronger. My blackberry bushes took root. I kept throwing pots at the community center, walking local trails, and baking new recipes that were wholly mine. Some might call my actions revenge, but I saw them as reclamation, a refusal to let my worth be defined by those who saw me as a means, not a person. I see it not as revenge, but as consequences. At 78, I've learned that love without respect is no love at all, and sometimes the truest kindness is to stop pretending. The rain feels different now, not a storm to endure, but a reminder that even the fiercest tempests pass, leaving the world cleansed and open to what's next. The apple pie I bake these days has less sugar, more warmth, cinnamon, and a touch of clove. Like me, perhaps. Like the truth that set us free. This morning, as I stirred batter for a new recipe, my phone glowed with a message from Sophie. An ultrasound image, a delicate profile in black and white, captioned, "Your granddaughter." She has your smile. I traced the screen lightly, a glimpse into a future I wasn't sure I'd see. Then I returned to my baking, blending fresh ingredients, crafting something entirely new. Much like the life I'm shaping at 78. One honest exchange, one boundary, one choice at a time. The oven timer chimed. Time to pull the pie out. Time to move forward. Eyes clear. Heart guarded but not shut. Time to embrace that some journeys don't start with a 9-hour drive through a storm, but with the courage to say, I am worth more than this. We all are.